Okay.
So hello everybody from the Academy Healing Nutrition, and what we're going to be doing for the next hour or so is an introduction into our style of cooking and healing, and we've named this webinar The Ultimate Art of Longevity. So there you go. So primarily I want to be interviewing Inga and getting her feedback on some of our concepts that we teach in the academy training, both here in New York and in London. Our first cooking class is starting this weekend in New York, and next year in March our program starts again in London, and we also have our complete training available online. And for those folks who can't also who don't want to do it all online, you're most welcome to join in any of our in-house workshops that we do. And the unique thing about this program is that we do practical cooking classes, because what I've noticed over the last 3 to 4 decades doing a lot of nutritional counseling is when people don't really see how to put this food together and make it tasty and enjoyable, and also work out some of the strategies that make this accessible and easy to do, and you can integrate it into your day-to-day life. So that's some of the some of the questions that I'm going to be throwing at Inga over the next 45 minutes. Now, towards the end of the webinar, we're going to be taking any of your questions, and feel free to ask as many questions as you want, and it can be as broad as you want. That will be up to you. So let's begin. So Inga, there's always this theme between East and West. So in the West, we've got our analytical food, and that's what most people in our culture, that's the way they get to know food. It's like, where am I going to get my vitamin C and, your complex carbohydrates. But as you know, in this curriculum, we do an East and West. We bring in the energetics of the East, and we, apply that with our scientific awareness and so forth. So how do you sort of see the, the unique benefits of that in your training?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to see in perspective how here in the West, whether we are in the United States, Canada, Europe, or New Zealand, Australia, like pretty much all of the West has been influenced by this understanding about food that comes from science, right? So we are talking about the last century pretty much of scientific discoveries into the molecular structures of different foods and how they affect our biology pretty much. And this language that the science is using is not our innate way of understanding food and relating to food. It's worth looking at how our ancestors used to think about food, like how was their relationship with food. And I have a pretty good experience in my childhood when I was growing up in Russia, and my grandmother was pretty much growing all of her own food. And that is amazing to even conceive now of the fact that I was nourished from my very early childhood with everything that was naturally coming from the earth. And we didn't have any processed foods at the time. And that is not, the reality for many of the people in the West nowadays. So I feel like because of that connection with the food that was grown naturally and according to the seasons, I have absorbed this understanding of, food and how it actually makes me feel, and how it relates to how much energy I have to put out to create my reality around me. So there is a different kind of language that our body has to relate to food. And that language is nothing new. It's not like a recent discovery. It's not a scientific breakthrough. This is something that our ancestors have been connecting to for thousands of years. And in fact, in Chinese medicine, they have mapped it out and they call it food energetics. So there is this beautiful concept of food energetics, and it's really well covered in our curriculum, and we start uncovering the different layers of food energetics from the very first class, where we get the introduction into the foundational concepts of Chinese medicine, the yin and yang, the 5 elements, and how these elements of nature relate to our bodies and how they relate to how we feel and think and perceive our reality. So food energetics is a really beautiful way to talk about food. And just to give you a quick example, what this whole energetics thing is, there are foods on the whole spectrum of edible things that we can consume, and they range between, say, cooling and warming, right? So there are foods that are really, really hot in their thermal nature, and they would affect us, you know, in a heating way that would perhaps activate our circulation and would be more warming for our system in general. And then there are foods that are cooling, right? So just a very quick example, right? So one very extreme food on the spectrum of warming foods is a hot pepper, whether it's cayenne or chipotle or whatever. A hot pepper is a hot pepper. When you take it into your body, you know that it's really hot. You know, your brain starts tingling from this really hot energy, and you start perspiring. This is your body's natural reaction to expel excess heat from the body. So this is one extreme. And on the other spectrum, we have another extreme, for example, watermelon, right? So watermelon is a summer fruit, or better say berry. So it's a summer fruit, and when we eat watermelon, even in the middle of the heat of the summer, we start feeling cold. Like our limbs get a little bit cold, and we start feeling like in a refrigerator inside. So a watermelon is an actual refrigerant food. You know, it's very cooling for our system, very calming too. So the two extremes. So we look at foods from this energetic perspective, and then we go from there.
So, for example, some of the categories that we work from at an energetic level are yin and yang, the 5 elements, and as Inga mentioned, the temperatures or thermal action of foods. We also look at the doctrine of signatures, these various characteristics of where and how plants grow and how they affect our internal energies. We look at the meridian system. Also, some foods are called clearing foods. And we look at the 3 treasures. Now, the 3 treasures is also the heart and soul of working out Chinese herbal tonic formulas and so forth. So can you tell us a little bit about the integration of some of the superfoods and the tonic foods in your classes?
Yeah, so, you know, often here in the West, we look at our nutrition from a more functional perspective. So we are looking to, say, fill in our daily requirements for protein, carbohydrates, fats, and different vitamins, and so on. And so often people take the route of using supplements, for example, to plug in some nutritional gaps that they have. And there is a place for supplements, of course, you know, and the supplement industry is, you know, growing exponentially every year. And there are some really, really fun supplements that are coming up that are really, you know, doing what they're supposed to do. However, our foundation should always start with good quality food. And so in the program, in our longevity diet training, we have 3 cooking classes where we integrate cooking for longevity with these cutting-edge discoveries that we have around supplements and superfoods. And so superfoods are a really fun thing that we have nowadays, and they come from all the different parts of the world. And interestingly, they have been parts and they have been used by indigenous cultures for thousands of years. They have been staples in different cultures over many millennia. And so now they're available for us all around the world. And of course, there's a place for them. Right, so we don't just use superfoods as supplements, but we also look at them from their energetic perspective. Just like in Chinese medicine, we look at all foods based on their energetic nature, whether they belong to a certain element, whether they generate more heat or nourish our water element or help to consolidate our earth element. So we look at the superfoods the same way. And yes, I know, they are called superfoods because scientists have discovered that perhaps some of them are extremely high in vitamin C, or because they have a really rich antioxidant profile, or because there is a particular molecule there that is not found in any other plant foods. So that's good to know. It's good to see that science is catching up and they're trying to find solutions to feed the world and to keep us nourished. However, we still need to connect and find ways to relate with our food in this like intimate, energetic way. So in some ways, how we discover that is actually putting things together. Say in my tonic elixir module, we play a lot with making different tonic teas and elixirs. And so we don't just throw things together because they are high in vitamin C and they're powerful superfoods. But we look at how can we bring more consciousness into what our body needs today, where we are energetically today. Are we overly dry and stressed out and we have inflammation in our body and we need to come down, we need to cool our system. So we look at, okay, which superfoods can bring this cooling, calming energy? And then we intelligently craft ourselves these tonic potions that help to nourish us on a very, very deep level. So it's not just something to, I often see it as just shooting bullets and hoping that it will reach the target. But instead, you're actually having a laser focus on the exact thing that you want to achieve in your body, in your state and your well-being today, and then making an intelligent decision about your choices. So,
Right.
so there is a place for supplements and superfoods, but we always start with food foundation.
So the other thing that we do in our curriculum is that we choose and teach from all of the food groups. We always say if you're vegan, we're going to show you how to do it better. If you're vegetarian, we're going to show you how to do it better. And if you're a meat eater, we're going to show you how to do it better. And we also discuss a lot of the food phobias that people have now about eating grains and so forth. And part of the education that we give people is this, traditional methodology around certain food groups like grains. We've forgotten how to prepare them correctly and select them, from organic sources. And even, if we're talking about bread, and we talk about how a natural leavened bread, not added yeast and so forth, is a completely sort of different scenario to modern wheat and modern bread, and it has a completely different effect. And we also talk about the different qualities of dairy food, how, raw milk is actually real food and commercialized dairy food is actually quite toxic. So can you give us a little bit of feedback about your approach to all of the food groups?
Yes. So I always feel that we need to have a harmonious relationship with our nourishment, right? And that includes, having a broad range of foods and food groups that we can eat from. What I am, for example, looking out of my diet is freedom. right? I don't want to limit myself in certain things because I am reacting to them. So, and for many people, this is not the reality. You know, for many people, because of their upbringing, or perhaps some of the health issues that they have developed over time, they have a lot of restrictions when it comes to food. So there are allergies or intolerances, and sometimes, you know, actual really, you know, difficult reactions to certain foods, like that cause anaphylactic shock, for example. So there's something of a disconnect when we can't relate to a certain food group, because all of the foods are coming from our earth mother, and earth is nourishing, and she's growing those foods for us to nourish our elements. So nature is drawing on these elements, the water, the fire of the sun, and the earth, the minerals. So she's drawing on everything to create foods for us to create our bodies, to recreate, rebuild our bodies. So we want to draw on all the food groups. And when we have these restrictions, it creates a disconnect from nature. And we are not separate from nature. We are coming from nature. We are born from nature. And so I like to give always my students a perspective of all the different food groups and what they do for us. So there's a place for animal foods, and I know that a lot of people nowadays are kind of going in the vegan vegetarian direction, and I myself have been vegetarian for a number of years, but still, you know, there's a place for animal foods in our life, in our diet, and we need to understand what is that relationship. You know, if we have been eating animal foods in the past, has it been an abusive relationship? Have we been eating too many animal foods? Or have we been eating too little, and therefore it has caused some imbalances in our body? So we need to look back at where things have been until the moment that we started becoming really mindful about what we put into our body. So that moment is defining. It actually shifts our perspective. It makes us think about who am I? You know, what is my biological makeup? What do I want to do with my life? And what kind of energy I want to put into myself in order to manifest my destiny? So it's a mindset that we don't often adapt in our modern life, you know, because we're just thinking about what to throw into our stomach on any given day just to get by, just to like not feel hungry or not feel emotional, or, you know, all the other reasons why we go for food, right? But there is a different, there's another like dimension to nutrition. And yes, it's, you know, for us here in this 3D reality, it's physical. And of course, there are also other things that nourish us, like nature. So we need to be mindful how to make that connection between nature and our body, and how to not see different food groups as enemies. Say, you know, our science is actually taking that route. They take a certain food group, say like they take fats, right? And then they demonize them. So for a couple decades, they create this story that fats are bad for you. And so then there is a whole generation of people that is raised with this story, and they're not consuming fats because they were told that they are not good for their bodies. And then they start developing certain health conditions that are often related to hormones, and that affect their entire health and well-being for the rest of their lives. So it's always good to look at any dogma, any restriction, any piece of news from the scientific community with a grain of salt, as we say, right? And see that everything has a place. Everything can be medicine. Like, it can be quite surprising, but when we talk about diet in the scope of our training, we look at how we can bring things into balance. And that is our life, our body, and also our relationship with food. So what has been our relationship with food until this moment that we are starting to think about it? And how do we want to build that relationship from now on? And where are we heading? What do we want to achieve, right? And how do we want to live? How much health do we want to embody? And that will influence our choices from now on. So what we had done before is done, and that's past. But now we have the future, and we can really connect with the elements of nature that provides us with food to become healthier. So we cannot separate ourselves. And that's where the understanding of energetics of different foods really comes handy. And it's a language, like I said before, that our ancestors knew innately. They didn't have to read about it in books. They didn't have to discuss it in webinars. They lived by it because they were listening to the flow of nature, to the cyclistical flow of the seasons, something that we are so disconnected from nowadays, because we have air conditioning in the summer in our houses and then heat in the winter. And we can get foods from all around the world 24/7 at a supermarket around the corner. So we are not thinking seasonally anymore. We are not thinking cycles. And therefore we are disconnecting from our own internal cycles. And we have longer cycles, like say we can have cycles of our, growth, maturation, and then older years. And we also have microcycles. And a good example of that is, women's cycles. We have our monthly cycle, and within that, it's like a whole journey that we go through, and a different kind of energy that we pass to initiate ourselves every month. So connecting back to that cyclistical nature around us and within our bodies, we can achieve by using certain foods. So tuning into what is available in that season where we are in. So say right now we are in the fall or autumn season, and the energy is drawing in. So from the expansion of summer, from a lot of heat of the summer, we are starting to consolidate our resources. We are starting to consolidate our energy, bring it deep into our core so that we can maintain warmth through the cool time of the year. So for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, this is the reality. Right. And so the weather is changing. It's now shifting. It was warm, then suddenly we had a cold spell, and then it got warmer again. So the body is trying to adjust. The body is in a period of transition. And therefore, the foods that we would normally eat, say in the summer, could not be appropriate for us. And that would throw us further out of balance. And nature already gives us enough challenge at this time. And, our immune system is working really hard to keep any pathogens at bay, or any what we call pernicious influences from the outside, like the wind and the cold that can penetrate our body and cause diseases like cold or flu. So now we really need to focus on what foods can support us through this transition. So they are the transitional foods, but they are also the foods that nature has provided for us in this season. So just look at what is around. And the best way to do that is, say, to head to a farmer's market, because farmers that grow their own food, they're more connected. And so what you see at the farmer's market is representing more of the availability in nature at this time of the year. So right now we are in the fall season, and just look at all this bounty. It's beautiful. We have a lot of squashes and orange colored vegetables, and a variety of leafy greens and brassica family, the cabbages, broccoli, cauliflower, and so on. So, and also a lot of allium family members like garlic and onions and leeks. So all of these, the pungent vegetables, they're really great at helping to protect our immune system from the external pathogens. So the nature has its wisdom, and it's constantly communicating to us as long as we listen. So if we pay attention to what is in season and try to eat just the foods that are in season and available at, say, your farmer's market, then we can harmonize our body with the current energy. And then we can say prevent that cold and flu that we usually get once a year or twice a year. So this is that wisdom that we are trying to activate in our students, in our training courses. And we do this by not just teaching about it. And yes, there are great resources and books that have all the information on the food energetics and how to think seasonally, how to think locally. But the main thing is to actually get into the kitchen and to start cooking and to start making your own meals and to start putting intention into what you're cooking, for what you're cooking, and how do you want to feel after you eat this food.
So what would be some of the dishes that you like to get people started with? You know, in our modern age, there's a lot of people now who don't have the skills to cook. There's a lot of people now that have been really brought up on a lot of takeaway foods. Then they get involved with their work and career, and they, you know, start to skip meals and get into, you know, again, taking away meals and so forth. So, you know, what would be some of the recipes, and how do you advise people to get started on the longevity diet?
Well, first of all, I should say that I cannot convince anyone to make a switch, right? Nobody has that power to convince anyone to make a switch. And there often is like a point that a person reaches when they start seeing that there's no other way for them but to change the usual flow of things in their life. And they start understanding that they really need to pay attention to their body, and that perhaps they need to pay attention more to their nutrition and their nourishment. So that's already like a good switch. And often to get to this place, it takes either some really serious health condition to occur in the body, and pain. Pain, as they say, is the greatest teacher. Or another motivation that often people use to explore more healthy ways of cooking and eating is vanity. You know, so we are all about vanity nowadays. We all want to have beautiful, radiant, clear skin and vibrant, shiny hair and like look great and so on.
Well, Inga, that's not just these days. That's been since the beginning of time. I've always said, you know, we're all vain. And if you look at the animal kingdom, and if you look at indigenous tribes, they look after themselves, they clean themselves, they dress up beautifully, you know. So that's been with us, and I think it's very important to, you know, embrace that in its totality. But carry on. Like, so but generally speaking, what's your advice with getting people started on the longevity diet? We take it that people got themselves to a place where they're now motivated to make changes, and they want some practical advice now.
Yeah, so it can be quite overwhelming, you know, when you're changing your lifestyle and diet. But I feel that the easiest way is to start, you know, really small with just a dish or two. And this is what we kind of go through really well in the training, where first we hone in on the season. So that's the easiest thing to do, right? So we are right now in the fall season. What is the energy of the season? What are the foods that support this energy? What are the foods that help to nourish us at this time of the year? So you learn everything about this season of fall and the element that it represents, which is metal. So this is where we start, just to tune us into this, like, you know, mental proper frame. And then you start picking a number of foods, and you start thinking, okay, which ones I like, which ones do I have a craving for, which ones I'm gravitating more towards. Let me experiment with them, right? And usually the first thing that I suggest is a soup. You know, soup is an understated staple that is, you know, civilizations have thrived and have developed around a soup, a big pot of soup. So we are trying to bring this back. And in fact, it's a really practical thing to do. You cook a big pot of soup for yourself or for your family for, say, 4 to 5 days, and then you don't have to think about dinner. So often people say, oh, cooking for myself, that means like a lot of work, all that shopping and all that prepping in the kitchen and spending a lot of time in the kitchen, and I don't have that time, right? But making a big pot of soup, it may take you, say, a couple hours in the kitchen, and then before that, some shopping and planning ahead. But then you can just reheat it and eat it for 3-4 days in a row. So for some people, it's really easy to start with like a simple soup recipe. And, one of the first things that we do in our cooking classes at the Academy of Healing Nutrition is miso soup. So miso soup, and how I call it, it's a concept miso soup. So it's not just the miso soup that you're used to from the Japanese restaurants, which is like very salty, and there's like a bit of tofu floating in there and some seaweed, but it's a concept miso soup. So it's a big pot of soup into which we put all the different food groups, and we'll layer it from the ground up, so to say. So we go into the ocean and see what is the ocean giving us. What are the gifts of the sea? What can we put in the soup? Then we go on the land, and then on the land we have vegetables that are growing into the ground, so the root vegetables. And then we have the round vegetables that are sitting on the ground. So we have all of the different kinds of vegetables and food groups and kingdoms in this one big pot of soup. And it's so nourishing, and it has amazing condiments that have been used in, say, Japanese and Chinese culture for thousands of years for healing the gut, for helping us to stay centered and nourished and connected to nature. So one of the easiest things is to make a big pot of soup, and then you have enough to feed your family for the next few days. So that's what we often start with. And also I make another dish in another class, which is a lentil soup, which is another great way to nourish yourself. So lentils are inexpensive. They're from the bean family, right? So the legume family. And they don't take a lot of time to prepare. So usually with beans, we have to be kind of careful there and prepare them properly. Most of the beans need to be soaked for many hours before cooking them. So for at least 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours, your beans need to be soaked to help to neutralize the anti-nutrients, the phytic acid and the lectins that are naturally present in the skins of the beans. So many people have trouble with beans, and that is because they're not prepared properly. So with lentils, they're smaller beans, they're easier to digest, and they don't require soaking. So they're very easy to cook, and they can make amazing dishes. There's a variety of recipes that we provide also with different kinds of lentils and also with beans. And part of what we do in Academy is educate our students on how to properly prepare the foods so that their nutrition is amplified, so that that bean becomes more digestible, or that grain doesn't cause digestive problems anymore, that its gluten is not an issue. So this is, I feel like, an important part, that awareness and then connecting with the season, and then just trying 1 or 2 dishes in your kitchen. And once you try 1 or 2 dishes and you get inspired, then you can continue on exploring other recipes and perhaps really inquiring with your body. It's an ongoing relationship that you're building, and you're asking your body, what is it that you need today? What is it that you need for the next week? What's coming? How do you want to feel? Are you cold? So how about we make something warming? How about we choose something that will help to keep us, warm? So, so these are some of them, like mindset hacks that we go through in this training.
Great. folks, for those who are listening to this, we're going to leave some good quality time to answer your questions. So if you've got any questions, in about 5-10 minutes, we want to take your questions. So you can start to put them down into the chat window, start thinking about some of the questions. We want this to be interactive. So Inga, later on we have the fabulous Nam Singh teaching as well, where we get into the congis, which I think is one of the most nutritional, easy to digest dishes that ever existed. And we also start to show students how to put in the herbs of longevity into soups and broths and casseroles and so forth. So we entitled this talk this evening as Cooking, the Art of Cooking, the Ultimate Art of Longevity. In your opinion, how can we get away with saying that?
Can you please repeat that one more time?
So essentially, longevity is a very popular subject now, and for decades, the Academy has been teaching the longevity diet, and the whole heart of that has really been about learning to cook again and create this whole dynamic with what you've been saying, like this relationship back to the earth, and also the relationship to your body and understanding your cravings, and now starting to select higher quality ingredients and learning how to prepare them correctly, and learning how to use the 5 elements and the 5 tastes, and starting to make stronger blood and stronger energy again, and that ultimately is what's going to heal the body. So that's why I would say that the art of cooking is vitally important for people to relearn how to do this as a #1 protocol for your longevity. Now, most people sort of glaze over that. They're eating out all the time and they're just relying a lot on supplements and so forth. So, what's your definition of being able to achieve longevity?
Yeah, I love this question and have so many ideas how I could direct it, but let's see. So yes, a lot of people nowadays are eating out, right? And it's convenient, or it's a takeout. It's a no-brainer. You call the guy next door and the pizza is delivered in 5 minutes. So I see the journey towards longevity. Well, first of all, it's a lifestyle and it's a mindset. So longevity is a mindset, and we need to really think about, why do we want to live a long life? What is the purpose of living a long life? And how much we want to embody ourselves with this vital energy in order to live a long life, to achieve whatever it is out there that we want to achieve, right? So first of all, it's this mindset. And second, to me, the journey towards longevity is actually the journey to connect deeply with our essence. And that is absolutely related to our journey to connect back with nature. So if we look at some of the longevity cultures around the world, the Caucasian cultures, which are very close to my heart because I have been raised in the Caucasus, or the Japanese cultures, or many other cultures that have achieved longevity, amazing longevity, and live over 120 years. So all these cultures have something in common, even though they're all eating different foods, and some are more northern cultures, other ones are southern. So their diets are completely different. However, they are in the same state of mind, and they are connected with nature. They're flowing with the seasons. They're listening to their bodies. And perhaps it's not so mental as it is with us nowadays. It's more intuitive. You know, they have this relationship with like the plants that are growing outside, and with the animals perhaps that they herd, their cows and their sheep and so on. So it's that relationship that we're seeking. And when we are just eating out in the restaurant, we are missing several links in this chain that connects us to nature. And perhaps, you know, there are a couple hacks right there that we could employ if there is no other way for us, but say to eat out on a certain night. And this is going to happen, you know, these are the conveniences of our modern life. And we, you know, we do have this privilege and we can use it. However, that should not be our, you know, day-to-day reality. And it's important to cook for ourselves because we will connect with the source of the food better if we prepare this food at home. And before that, the link before that is actually shopping or sourcing that food ourselves and connecting with perhaps the farmers that are growing that food for us. And perhaps the step before that is actually growing our own food, and connecting with the earth right there at the source. So all of these links in the chain that lead us to the food are important. From growing our own food to then cooking our own food to then consuming it with reverence. Because, you know, many of the problems that we have with food, like indigestion and all those like chronic gut problems, are because of our disconnect from the earth microbiome. You know, like they say a lot nowadays, you know, their research in the microbiome and our connection with the soil of the earth, that, you know, our gut is like an ecosystem and it has a rich microbiome, and so does the soil. And the problem nowadays is that our soils have been so depleted and they have been so heavily sprayed with chemicals that we are losing the valuable microbiome of our soils. So our foods are grown mindlessly by big companies, by big agricultural conglomerates. So and so the link there is missing, that respect, that reverence to nature, to its miraculous ability to provide nourishment for us. So it's seen more functionally, you know, and because there's that disconnect, we are missing that important link to our own health, to our planet. And so a way to heal, because all of the health pretty much originates from our ability to digest food, which on another level basically means digesting our life. And we are in a consumptive paradigm. You know, we are the creatures that consume life around us in order to grow and thrive and survive. So we need to be mindful about what we nourish ourselves with. And you know, that ties intimately towards longevity. If you want longevity, you need to be mindful about the health of nature around you, or the health of nature from where your food is coming from.
Great. Well, look, we're going to leave some time for some questions here. Inga, can you look at the Q&A panel here?
Yeah.
We have a question here. What are the best foods for good gut health, chronic inflammation? I have a chronic inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, and tend to have a lot of flare-ups and ulcers. Mm-hmm. So for instance, in our healing classes, we talk a lot about different health conditions and so forth. Essentially, the energetics of the longevity diet can apply to a lot of different health conditions. It's not like you have to do one thing, you know, more than others and so forth. But here and there, for certain conditions, we do talk about avoiding certain foods that are possibly contributing to the, you know, the creation of this illness in the first place. There's two dynamics there. We talk about the curative and food as therapy, and also primarily we're focused on prevention. This way of eating is set up so that you don't get cancer and inflammation and all of and diabetes and all, so you don't get it in the first place and you live a long, healthy life. Now, here's some ideas that I'll contribute, and then maybe you can contribute some more. So first of all, with things like chronic inflammation and the whole digestive tract inflammation and so forth. Well, a lot of people these days talk about getting off gluten, and that's a damn good thing, because modern gluten is, I always call wheat, schizophrenic. It doesn't even know that it's wheat anymore. And gluten is involved with a lot of modern baked foods, and you've got the sugar in there and all the other chemicals and all sorts of things. Ultimately, this is a way of eating that eventually you can come back to a whole range of foods and enjoying them in their appropriate ways again, further down the track. That first year of the longevity diet is all about really getting that digestive system working again. The other thing that can contribute to inflammation is, of course, sugar and hard to prepare foods. And generally you want to just get yourself off processed foods to begin with, and also and coffee. Coffee is very yang and very heat forming, so it can be, quite inflammatory in that sense if you've got that tendency at the moment. Now, and also what we call the high acid forming food. So to begin with, our approach to like a lot of chronic inflammation is starting with things like the bone broth. Bone broth, we've seen radical improvements within 3 to 4 to 5 weeks with all sorts of like leaky gut, intestinal inflammation, stomach upset, and so forth. So that would be the first protocol, is getting into your bone broths, making your easy to digest soups, getting those sweet potatoes and pumpkin and sauteed onions and so forth. Getting into your probiotics. So just getting a good form of healthy miso to begin with. And there's a whole range of probiotics that you can start to build up, but just getting into the good old miso soup to begin with. And so the kind of the direction here is easy to digest foods, soothing to the digestive tract, ultimately alkalizing to the digestive tract and strengthening to the digestive tract. Of course, putting things in like wakame or kombu into your soups is going to be very, very good for inflammation and helping to detox the body from, previous style eating. So this question, she has a lot of flare-ups and ulcers as well. So would you like to contribute to this question?
Sure. So I like what you mentioned about food and digestive system taking time to heal. And that is true. That's another interesting difference in the mindset between, say, taking medication for a certain health problem, say ulcers or irritable bowel syndrome, right? So taking medication to suppress the symptom, which sometimes works immediately, but then creates more flare-ups. So the more you play with that instant gratification, instant fix, the more your body rebels. And the longer it would take you to actually get better. But when you go for food, when you start using food as medicine, it will take time. So food doesn't always work instantly, and it takes time to rebuild your body with the food. But what you do need to do is to provide the proper building blocks for your system to start bringing a better sense of balance. Because our bodies are wired to create balance. We are constantly, unconsciously seeking balance. And when we give the proper environment, when we give the proper nourishment, your body will start readjusting. It will start to, save energy perhaps on fighting off like the inflammation, which is the reaction against, say, certain foods. It will save on that energy and actually start rebuilding the lining of your gut. So it's that, you know, interesting like aspect of being patient with healing yourself with food. And yes, I love the bone broths for that. Probiotic foods in particular. Yes, supplements are great, but probiotic foods, like we have the trinity of probiotics, starting small with a little bit of probiotic foods at every meal. Say we have fermented vegetables, and it's very easy to incorporate into your meals. It could be a little bit of pickled ginger. It could be a bit of sauerkraut. It could be some pickled beets. Or it could be a fermented dairy product, like, say, kefir. Kefir has amazing healing benefits. If you are okay with dairy, it's good to start head on with kefir. For some people who are a little bit allergic to dairy, they can actually often tolerate goat kefir quite well. And they're surprised sometimes that, you know, they're not reacting in the same way, say, they react to milk or commercial dairy. So a little bit of say dairy probiotic. And then we also have probiotic beverages, say things like kombucha or beet kvass, or like a bit of apple cider vinegar in hot water. So things like that, you know, incorporating just a couple strategies, say having a bit of pickles with your dinner, or having a little bit of fermented dairy or a drink with your breakfast, and spacing it out throughout the day so that your body is constantly supplemented with these healing bacteria, probiotic bacteria. So these are the two main things I actually like to incorporate right away with someone who has digestive issues. And then we also have some herbs that have very soothing quality on the digestive tract. And so there's a category of herbs that are mucilaginous in nature. So they are sort of like slippery. And when you take them, they help to moisturize and lubricate your digestive lining. So most of the foods that we eat nowadays are very dry and harsh for the digestive system. So like think chips and all the like dry processed foods, crackers, fries, and so on. They are very harsh on the digestive system. So you need something that is like very lubricating and moisturizing. And herbs, for example, like slippery elm or marshmallow are fantastic. And they not only lubricate your intestinal lining, but they also, they don't only lubricate the intestinal lining, but they also help to rebuild the cells of your gut. And they're also very cleansing, and they serve as a probiotic for the beneficial microorganisms. So they help to form colonies in your gut for the good bacteria. So it's really good to have a nice herbal combination with, say, marshmallow root and slippery elm and licorice and maybe aloe vera. Aloe vera juice is fantastic for those who have ulcers or any kind of inflammatory gut conditions. It's very soothing, especially the aloe vera gel. And it's best to use the actual gel from the leaf. So you just buy or grow an aloe vera plant at home, and then you can open it and just eat like the flesh from the fresh aloe vera. So things like that. And then there's some fantastic herbs that are coming from the Chinese medicine tradition and also from Ayurveda that are great for rebuilding the intestines. And what we do is we don't just take them as supplements, we make them into healing brews so that it's better, it's easier for body to digest it. Because when we just pop pills into our system, they also require energy from our stomach to break them down. You know, to break down that capsule or to break down that hard pill. So we put the herbs into brews, or even better, in our cooking with Chinese herbs, we incorporate these herbs into our soups, into our dishes, where they become part of a meal. So they're not something separate. They become part of our nourishing, healing meal. So these are a couple of things that we, teach in the cooking classes.
Right.
So I hope
that's fantastic.
That was an answer enough.
Yeah, no, that's great. So folks, this is your chance to put down any more questions, because we're just about out of time. It's been 1 hour. And Inga, could you just check the Q&A? I'm not too sure if there are any other questions there. Can you just check it for me?
Okay, so so that was answered. So there's a question here. Your thoughts on how to heal from Cushing's syndrome and how to gain weight the healthy way. Do you want me to go first, Roger, or you want to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No, you go.
So, yeah. So to start with, I'm not a medical doctor, and I actually have never heard about Cushing's syndrome, and I'm not sorry about that. Thing is, sometimes, say I'm working with clients, and often people come with symptoms or with diagnoses that I have never heard. And that's often going to be the case, because we simply cannot keep up with all the syndromes and all those labels that people, that the medical community is coming up. However, our approach in the longevity diet is slightly different. We look at disease differently. We don't see it as a label. We don't see it as a name. We don't see it as ulcer. We don't see it as arthritis or Cushing's syndrome. We see it as an imbalance in the energetic system. So we look at the nature of this imbalance. We look at how it manifests in the body, and how it manifests in the body of this particular person, because it will look differently for everyone. Even if we talk about, say, arthritis, right? It will manifest differently in different people. It may be activated by heat, it may be activated by cold weather, it may be activated by a certain food that you eat. So it will be different for every person. So we look at every case individually, and we really have this deep inquiry into what has been the history of this person with their lifestyle and their diet. And how we can bring balance to their system, so that whatever energetic imbalances that they have can resolve. So say, if I didn't know anything about the Cushing's syndrome, right, but I see that you're trying to gain healthy weight, or gain the weight the healthy way. So there are different strategies that we can employ there. Well, first of all, making your foods nutrient dense. Something that, is really lacking from our diets nowadays. We want to make sure that they're well prepared, and that they have a variety of textures and flavors. And this is also something that I teach in particular in my first cooking class, how to combine the 5 flavors, the 5 main flavors that relate to the 5 elements that are making our body, how to put them all together in one meal, so that your body gets this message that it's properly nourished, that all of its aspects are fed. So, like low weight or inability to gain weight can also be looked at metaphorically. What is it that you are, afraid to take on into your body? So like I always go in that direction a little bit, exploring with a person, what are the reasons, or what are the predispositions, what are the constitutional issues in the body or in the mindset that prevent the putting on of the healthy structures and the healthy flesh around your bones, so to say. So, and then, you know, a couple of hacks for gaining weight. You know, of course, you need to make sure that you have enough protein in your diet, right? Because proteins are the building blocks of your tissues. And then another one is actually having more frequent nutrient-dense meals. And like I said, having all of the 5 flavors in your meal. Like we have sweet, sour, spicy or pungent, salty, and what is the other one? Sour,
pungent, sweet, salty,
bitter. Bitter. Yeah, the bitter is the flavor that is often missing from our diet. But also the most important flavor, interestingly, for weight gain is sweet and a bit of sour. So sweet flavor helps to consolidate. It's very nurturing. It's very nourishing. It's the flavor of Mother Nature itself. It's like that love and sweetness of Mother Nature. And that's why often, if you think about it, when we're stressed out, when we are tired, when we are exhausted, we are craving sweet, right? But sweet doesn't have to mean sugar or desserts or chocolate. You know, sweet is present in all of the foods naturally. Sweet is even present in animal foods. Sweet is present in all vegetables and in all plants. So sweet is the predominant flavor in all of our foods. So we just need to find ways how to discover it in a healthy way. So for example, healthy sweet vegetables are the pumpkins, the squashes, the carrots and beets and so on. So the root vegetables, they are sweet in nature. They help to build our center. They help to build our foundation. And then when we add a little bit of sour to that, sour helps to consolidate the sweet flavor. It kind of helps to hold it in place. So it helps to astringe our tissues. So it helps to keep our tissues in place, you know, so that the sweet flavor is not empty and transitional. So it's not just an instant gratification, but so that the sweet flavor stays as the love for your body, you know, as the love that you accept from Mother Nature. So yeah, so it gets a little bit there into the exploration of the mindset always with diet, because it's not just about the diet.
Sure. Well, from memory, Cushing's syndrome or disease is associated with like the hormone system of the body. I think it's the adrenals. And, you know, in the longevity diet, this has never been the low-fat diet. It never has, and it never will be. This program's been going for 35 years, and even 35 years ago, I was saying that low fats have been an absolute disaster. It has been. So, you know, with any kind of hormonal disease, you really need to start to get back into these healthy fats and using them, you know, particularly with adrenal exhaustion and all of that, which I think is Cushing's syndrome. So, you know, for instance, we use coconut oil, and we use high quality animal fats, including high quality butter and ghee. When we talk about things like butter, we have to source it from organic and also ideally from raw milk, so that it hasn't been pasteurized, homogenized, etc. So they are the sort of fats that we like to work with. We also like to work with olive oil and to a degree sesame oil and avocado oil. So getting back into those high quality fats, I strongly suggest for everybody, not just this person with Cushing's disease, that because it starts to build up the hormones again and regulates the whole hormone system. with the exhaustion of the adrenal glands, in Chinese medicine, that's the water element, the kidneys and the bladder. The adrenals sit on top of the kidneys. So there's a whole range of like water element foods that you could help to build that energy, adrenal kidney energy back up. Particularly things like black bean soups, using the seaweeds, using black foods, which we call the strong Jing foods. And all of these foods also help to regulate your weight, including the fats. So I highly recommend for this person that they start to investigate high quality fats and getting that back into their diet, because that will start to regulate their diet and they'll put on the right amount of weight again. Just even using things like avocado and depending, in Chinese medicine, we have the 4 body types. So, we would have to take that into consideration as well. If you're losing weight because of your so-called body type or fast metabolism, then there's some great foods that you can encompass that help to regulate your weight. Because we don't actually see what you look like, it's hard for us to gauge that. We do have these 4 body types that we can fine-tune the diet. So the adrenal exhaustion, Cushing's disease, and you're going to have cortisol all over the body because of that. And that's, as you know, the stress factor. So obviously lifestyle strategies are going to be very, very important for this person, that they start to, create some better, in want of another word, a better sort of feng shui in their life, that they are very careful around electromagnetic fields, that they get most Mother Nature by taking their shoes off, and that starts to drain the cortisol and the excess sort of positive electrons around the body, etc. So avoiding those stressful situations. The water element of the adrenals all get recharged at night. So deep sleep is very, very, very important. You have to create a low stress lifestyle, which is, in a nutshell, just eating natural foods and getting a little bit back to nature and using the power of the mind to, clear yourself of a lot of emotional sort of anxieties and fears that, of course, are always going to produce even more cortisol in the body, Mm-hmm. You have to watch out for coffee. Coffee just really rips into your hormonal system. I always say you've got to be healthy to be drinking coffee. And you'd have to watch out for excess alcohol. A little bit of alcohol can be quite relaxing and could be your medicine. I would also recommend some green tea because of its lovely sort of clearing action of cortisol and its healing effect on the liver. So I hope that that helps. So any other questions there? Here's one. Do you see this question that's popped up? I have so many clients that are, I think that's driolin, with constant yeast infection. I'm not too sure of that word. Constant infections, and the Western doctors are not willing to give a different solution besides oral Western medications. What would you recommend be to help balance the body back to a normal state? Constant yeast infections. Do you want to start with that?
Sure. Yeah, I love working with Candida, right? So that's one of the common yeasty infections, so to say. Just like with everything else, yes, say I am aware that it's called Candida overgrowth, and that's actually one of those very common things that now doctors are starting to be more mindful about, more aware of, and they do indeed not offer any long-term solutions, just temporary fixes. However, from our Chinese medicine understanding, we look at these yeasty conditions as damp conditions. So there are, like if you think about the environments where yeasts like to proliferate, they're usually these damp, swampy conditions. So you can think about your body as an ecosystem, right? And things are transpiring in your ecosystem. So it could be an arid desert, it could be a damp swamp, it could be an ocean, and it could be a variety of different landscapes, right? So with people who develop candida in yeast infections, their environment is a damp swamp. So it's kind of stagnant, it's not moving, it's a lot of water, and sometimes also it pairs up with heat or inflammation because there is just no movement, there's no air, there's no circulation in the system. So we can look at it from several different perspectives, but this is the one that I like to bring as that like ecosystem example. So, and how do we resolve that? How do we manage a damp swamp, right? So, first of all, we need to dry up our system a little bit, or to stop feeding the candida, stop feeding the environment, stop creating the environment that is so conducive for its overgrowth. So we need to eliminate out of our diet all the foods, all the things that are forming dampness. So these are usually the classic culprits that are also culprits in many other modern health conditions. So, for example, modern dairy, right? Modern wheat, and sugar, right? So these three things need to go right away. So these are the
and all
three
the other poor quality oil, fats, and yeah, carry on.
That's right. So first the three, and then of course we need to clean up the diet in a big way, removing all of the oxidized fats or poor quality fats. So that includes soy oil, that is the most common oil that they use in restaurants. So that all your takeout food, all your food that is cooked in the restaurants, that's usually either soy oil or canola oil, right? So these are some of the very inflammatory oils out there. So that has to be cleaned up. All of the processed foods need to be cleaned up. So first we need to eliminate things that create the environment in which the yeasts thrive. And then we can start employing other strategies. And what I often see is both in the medical community and also in the alternative community, they go about candida by fighting it. So it's a war against candida. So they actually try to like throw bombs at it. So it could be a bomb in a form of antibiotic. It could be a bomb in a form of a really strong herb that is fighting yeast, but it's a bomb in any case. So we don't want to create more war in our body. I usually like to take a more peaceful approach, and because the bad bacteria like candida, they have a purpose in the body. You know, everything that happens in our body has a place. It has a purpose. Right. So we can't fully kill it and not destroy the balance somewhere else in your body. It will reverberate like in our ecosystem. You cut a tree and then, that will affect the quality of the air, perhaps, miles away. So we always like to take this peaceful approach and perhaps incorporating things that will nourish the environment, that will create more growth of the positive probiotic bacteria so that they can fight the yeasts naturally. And also, yes, there are some really good herbs that can help with establishing a good environment, and then the probiotic foods and the probiotic supplements. And then we also have medicinal mushrooms that are amazing at helping our immune system to fight off any pathogens and also to regulate the function of the immune system. So things like the reishi mushroom, for example. In general, in the wellness community, with people who are helping with candida issues, they they don't like mushrooms. They say that mushrooms are more damp formings because they grow in the dark, because they are, you know, they are fungus. So they promote the growth of fungus and yeast. But when it comes to medicinal mushrooms, they have a totally different dynamic with our body. They actually have the keys to unlock in our immune system, unlike any other substances. So employing some medicinal mushrooms in your creation of a new, better world in your intestines is paramount.
Exactly.
Yeah, so many strategies, but start seeing it as an ecosystem, and that's going to start helping you a lot. Like you may start maybe activating some parts of your brain that will start like seeing foods as wet or seeing foods as dry, and that could be the clues perhaps to share with your clients, like to think about their yeasty overgrowths and making connections with those bad guys.
Great. Well, look, I think we've got time for one more question. I think there's one more question here, isn't there, Inga? Psoriasis because of stress. Do you see that question there?
Yes, I do.
Well, obviously, it's a skin condition. In Chinese medicine, we have essentially two organ groups associated with this. We have the lungs, because we see the lungs control the skin, and we see the skin as the metal element and associated with the health of the lungs, right? And we also see this associated with liver qi. So in Chinese medicine, and this is what we teach in our curriculum, we teach the 5 elements because you're able to start to see the signs and symptoms that are associated with each organ group. The water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And of course, that's the liver for the wood, the heart for the fire, the spleen for the earth, the lungs for the metal, and the kidneys for the water. Now, Chinese medicine, we never really had this syndrome called stress, right? Like you've seen this evening, we take a lot of the Western concepts around imbalances and signs and symptoms, and we start to put it into an energetic pattern with yin and yang. Is it 2 yang? Is it 2 yin? Is it associated with one of the 5 elements, an imbalance in the kidneys and the liver? And then when you do that, you become your own doctor, which is a principle that we teach in our training. To be ultimately a free human being, you have to have the skills to be your own doctors, to start to, trust in developing your own destiny and taking control of your life. And food and the knowledge of food and herbs is pretty much very grounding for that. So in Chinese medicine, they didn't have stress as the way we think about it, but they did have this concept of stuck liver qi, or the liver getting a tendency towards heat. And often it's the liver is throwing that sort of excess energy out onto the skin in a way like this. The skin disease is kind of like the body trying to get rid of it, but it only got as far as the skin, right? And so it is a process of elimination, right? And so this general approach, like everything that you've heard Inga and I talk about, some of these other illnesses, they apply to your condition as well. Like start to clean up your diet, start to look at higher quality food groups and higher quality oils and fats. Very, very important for your condition. And avoid the high sort of stressful foods for the liver, right? So, yes, we know that stress is going to trigger your skin condition. That's quite well known. But for us, we look at that as the health of the liver. The liver, when it's healthy, it's healthy and calm and so forth, and it doesn't get stressed. So there's lots of good foods that you can build up the liver qi with, like fermented foods and the sour taste, and lots of vegetables. And of course, with skin conditions, you really have to watch out for alcohol because of its heating nature. It just really starts to get that liver heat developing. You probably notice this yourself, if you drink too much alcohol the next day, usually that skin condition gets worse. So heating foods like sugar and poor quality animal foods, caffeine and alcohol is something that you're really, really going to have to watch out for. So, just think of it as you could study a little bit more like the wood element in Chinese medicine. We're sort of starting to run out of time now, but that's some of my recommendations. And of course, this is considered an autoimmune disease to an extent. The immune system kind of overreacting to things. So in our approach, we use a lot of what Inga referred to before as adaptogens, herbs. This is particularly important in these very red, hot skin conditions. So we've already mentioned things like reishi and some of the other medicinal mushrooms. I'd highly recommend that you get into some of them. And don't forget your seaweeds. Your seaweeds are really good for cooling down the liver and getting rid of the toxin and the heat from the liver and getting it out of the body. And, you just got to watch out for your stress levels. That all of us have got to adopt, some peaceful methods for getting rid of your stress. So, Inga, would you like to contribute to this question, psoriasis?
That's great. I love it. And we do cover a lot how to deal with stress. Not just through food, obviously, but also how to employ more a holistic lifestyle and, do meditation and, have a regular, perhaps exercise routine that works for you and a healthy social environment. So there are different aspects of how we deal with stress. And, it's just a matter of picking a couple that really work for you and sticking with them, having some kind of routine that you can rely on. So some self-care. And then, of course, to take it that step further, adaptogenic herbs can really help us to build the foundational energies that help to prepare our body for just a stressful lifestyle. And we all are living a stressful lifestyle to a degree nowadays. Stress is not a new invention. It's been, it's the nature of our evolution. It's driving our human evolution. So we need some stress in our life, but it's a matter of how capable we are of adjusting to the ever changing flow of reality. And, you need to have some tools for that. So I love my herbs for helping me to manage stress. One of the best things out there is the reishi mushroom, actually. It's the mushroom of spiritual potency, and it helps to calm the spirit and also calm our nervous system and our immune system when it gets overactive. So in this particular case, it could actually be really interesting to explore what reishi could do. And also just another point there, Roger, you mentioned that skin is the outward organ, is the outside organ, is the most outside organ of our body, and it's connected to our lungs. And the lungs are, the health of the lungs is reflected in the skin. But we also in Chinese medicine connect lungs with large intestine. So this is again going back to our gut. And there's a connection between our lungs and, yes, their capacity to breathe and to extract oxygen, but also the capacity of our intestines to purge the old. So it's like this metaphorical, circulation of life in your body, taking in the breath of life, and then letting go of the old, something that you don't longer need in your life, that is not working for you anymore. So working with the intestine, working with the energy of letting go. And breath work is really great for both fighting stress and also for, you know, helping your skin to be properly nourished with oxygen.
Exactly.
That's all I have to say about that.
I think success with Sandra as well, for these skin conditions. So,
oh yes, yes.
That's maybe
Sandra is one of the superstars for the health of the skin.
Sandra is one of our tonic herbal teas that we teach our students. So we're just about out of time now. It's so I'd just like to mention that Inga is doing her first cooking weekend here in New York this coming weekend. Our program in New York always starts in October, and it goes for 9 to 10 months. It's roughly a weekend every month, spaced over the next several months. And we alternate, you know, theory and philosophy classes with practical cooking classes. The program also begins in London next year in March. The website for London is londonahn.com. Obviously, AHN stands for Academy Healing Nutrition. So that website is londonahn.com. And the website here for our program in New York is academyhealingnutrition.com. And if there's any information that you would like about the training course, you can email us at info@Academy Healing Nutrition. So this weekend, you are able to just attend this weekend and get a feel of the program. And we just charge you, you know, a nominal rate for the weekend. And if you want to sign up for the, you know, the whole training program this year, obviously that can be deducted off your fee. And we also do monthly payment schemes as well. So next year our orientations will be starting. Make sure you're on our database. If you are in Europe and London, make sure you're on their database, because you'll get notifications about questions and answers. So it's been great having you all on our webinar tonight. So thanks, guys, for the great questions. Thank you, Inga. I'll be seeing you this weekend. Looking forward to it. Always enjoy your cooking classes.
I'll be there.
So
this weekend in New York, and then
so it's good night from
yeah. So, and thanks to all the down under attendants from New Zealand. It was great to have everyone here. And just as a reminder, everyone is going to get a recording. So if you want to hear this again, you will have an opportunity. Okay.
Right.
So thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you sometime in our classes or on other webinars. Bye.